I call firstly on Deputy John Brady, who I understand is sharing his time with Deputy O'Reilly.
That's right, that's John Corley. For me, one of the most bizarre announcements from the Fianna Fáil Fine Gael budget yesterday is the €1 billion to be set aside annually from 2018 for the so-called rainy day fund. As if we need to wait around to see a rainy day arrive. For the people sleeping on our streets outside this very building here this evening and every other evening, the rainy day is here. For the elderly who sit in a library from one end of the day to the next to keep warm because they can't afford to turn on the heating, the rainy day is certainly here. And for young job seekers who have been living on €100 a week for 6 years now, the rainy day is certainly here. And for the lone parents who cannot afford to feed their children without assistance from a charity organisation, their rainy day is here. The reality is, for those living in the real world, the rainy day has long arrived. And how frustrating it must be for these people to see that the government have made the decision to put money aside rather than tackle poverty, tackle fuel poverty and indeed tackle inequalities and help to bring about a level of fairness. How can we afford to put money aside when we have a crisis in nearly every single sector of Irish society? Nelson Mandela once said, "A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones." Yet, Minister Varadkar strutted in here yesterday thinking he was Santa Claus, throwing around a few fivers like they were going out of fashion, stating that his social protection measures are, quote, fair, socially just and benefit everyone. This is fundamentally untrue. Older people have received a tokenistic €5 increase in their state pension. And with the cost of inflation, the increase is realistically leaving older people with little more than €1.30 per week. And this increase comes at the same time as that same Minister and Minister Ross over here in the chamber with us this evening will get a pay increase of €11,735, and that equates to €32.15 per day. Whilst the most vulnerable of our older people, those living alone, will see no increase in the living alone allowance. These are the older people who, in many cases, have only one source of income in the state pension and absolutely nothing for them because they're living alone. The fuel allowance also seeing no increase whatsoever. This is at a time where fuel poverty exceeds 28% of households right across the entire state. We've all heard the real-life stories. Older people having to wear their winter coats indoors, rationing coal week to week and going to bed just to try stay warm. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael's response to the growing fuel poverty is not to address it at all, to pretend it doesn't exist. The transitional pension remains completely abolished. This continues the absolute farce of those aged 65 who are obliged to retire being forced onto job seekers' payments for the year. We know from the CSO figures in April of this year that there were more 65-year-olds on job seeker payments than any other age group in the entire state. Currently, there are over 5,075 65-year-olds signing on job seekers. These are people who, in many cases, have worked their whole lives and have paid into their pensions, and these have been locked out of that very pension for an entire year, and absolutely nothing being done to address this. And if the measures introduced for older people are tokenistic, the measures for our young unemployed are an absolute disgrace. Yesterday, Minister Varadkar talked about the social impact assessment for his budget measures and how positive they are. I would love to see the social impact assessment for the discriminatory cuts for young people. I can bet they are far from positive and will reflect the reality on the ground as it exists. while throwing out fivers across the chamber here as if it was like throwing out snuff at a wake. Across the board, the government have quietly singled out young job seekers. In fact, they're the only group to receive less than everybody else. A job seeker aged between 18 and 24 will see their payment increase from €100 to a measly €102.70. A job seeker aged 25 will see their payment increase from €144 to €147.80, €3.80 additional. I raised this issue with the Minister last week, and again I asked the question, why do Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael feel the need to continue the discrimination against young people who are unemployed? Fianna Fáil continue to take credit for the positives in Budget 2017, but they may also take credit for this €2.70 increase for the 18 to 24-year-olds, considering they were the party that began the discriminatory cuts to our young people in the very first place. The message from the government to our young people remains the same as it was in 2009. Leave the country. While on one hand they are trying to mask this tiny increase as an incentive for young people to take up education and training opportunities, on the other they have just handed back €30 million to Europe in European structural funding that was earmarked for youth employment initiatives. What does that tell you about the government's concern for training opportunities for our young people? And with that same incentive to sign up for training opportunities comes with reduced funding to the very training and job activation schemes. Despite the most serious concerns recently highlighted by the Department auditors in relation to JobBridge, the slave labour scheme continues with no replacement in sight. And indeed, they're still, as of this day, advertising exploitative positions on the JobBridge slave labour activation website. The replacement was to be announced last month, and we need to see a real replacement. JobBridge 2.0 will simply not cut it. We also see reductions in funding for CE schemes, which are down 6%. Job Plus down 25%, and Gateway, which is down 78%. If indeed the Minister is phasing out Gateway, I welcome that. But the people who are out there engaged in work in local authorities across the state cannot be consigned back on the live register. They need to become full council employees, drawing down a full council salary. I want to touch on another section of society that this budget leaves even further behind: lone parents. As it turns out, despite the government spin and their pretense newfound concern for lone parents, this budget actually manages to leave them worse off than before. In fact, they will now be better off transferring from in-work benefits to a job seeker's payment. Lone parents that were forced off the one-parent family payment onto family income supplement will now be financially better off on a job seeker's payment. The government have actually managed to contradict themselves again when it comes to lone parents. Firstly, you cut the one-parent family payment qualifying age to 7 to encourage employment with a non-existent Scandinavian childcare system. So lone parents are left unable to take up unemployment as they simply cannot afford childcare. Now you have ensured that lone parents are better off than job seekers and not in employment at all. With all the talk of increased back-to-school costs, which I have raised on numerous occasions within this chamber and indeed at committee level, there are no increases in back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance. And so the burden of our so-called free education system continues. So, as it turns out, it was more like the Grinch that walked in here as opposed to Santa Claus for many, many people across the state. This budget, like successive budgets, favours the well-off. It expects our older people to be grateful for a fiver. It discriminates our young people because of their age, and it further marginalises lone parents. Budget 2017 is far from fair, it's far from socially just, and further away, more so than ever, than benefiting everyone in society. Garda Míle Máirgead.